much for inviting me once again to this fantastic event. So today what I would like to talk about is about the fantastic subject about the security for e-government citizens' digital identity. So it is a subject that I think is going to be quite interesting, and what I will try to do is to use some examples in order to make it more attractive for the audience. So let's start the presentation just talking about, first of all, about how is changing the world by the COVID-19, how is accelerating the digital transformation. So as you can imagine, today we are using tools in an incredible way than before we didn't use much. For example, just think about video conferencing, about cloud services that companies are offering. Can you imagine before? Really? Yes, those tools exist. We were using them, but not much as today. And the main reason is because the COVID. Because the pandemic is changing completely the mentality of our industry, is changing the mentality of the people in general. And what we have seen in the market is that COVID has speed the digital transformation by 6 years. So everything that we were planning before COVID right now is completely changed. So we have to really be in a completely different mode, because everything is changing very, very quickly, and this digital transformation is a reality today. So this is the first aspect I would like to talk. But the second aspect, it would be, hey, when we are talking about identity, when we are talking about digital things, what we have to take in mind is the security. How it's secure? What's happening in the market today about the cybercrime? And what we have seen, once again, is that data breaches have become the new normal. That is a reality. In 39 seconds, it's happening any attack. And usually, in the majority of times, the attacks or the credentials are the targets for those attacks. So this is something really important, because at the end of the day, when we are talking about digital identity, when we are talking about to identify yourself in a digital way, this is extremely important to make it in a secure way. And what is happening right now, or what exactly the governments are looking for, which is the aim today? Today, the aim would be that from a physical identity that we have in the majority of countries with a identity card, an ID card or something like that, you know, what they are trying to do is to create a digital identity, and a smart digital identity, which allow us to be identified and to have the availability or the ability to make transactions in a secure way. So this is the objective of this topic today, how we can do this in a secure way. No? When we are thinking about a strong identity, we have to think about what requirements are needed in order to really have a strong identity today. So as you can see in this picture, this quite nice picture, provable authenticity is something critical, because at the end we really need to know who is issuing, which authority is issuing our passport, our ID. So provable authenticity is something important. Provable rightful holder as well is quite important, because at the end, even sometimes we bound it with biometrically, you know, with the person, in order to make sure that the person is the right one who is holding that ID, okay? As well, provable integrity. Hey, that is not easy to corrupt. It's not tampered with physically or digitally ways, okay? As well is critical, very important point. Privacy, of course, to have all the information encrypted, that you can give access to your information to the right people, not to anybody who could read all the information that you have in your documents, in your chip, in the chip of your documents, okay? And obviously, trusted transactions. To do any transaction, to approve any document, anything, to sign any document, but with a non-repudiable way. So if you do this, it's absolutely clear that you are that person who are signing that document. So these are the 5 critical requirements that anybody should think in order to start talking about a strong identity. And here, as you can see, this is a physical document. But if we use these points and we move it to the digital world, what we can say is that these are the components, the technology that you must need in order to prepare a strong digital identity. And these are components that companies like us, we can offer to any government. So for example, let's start talking about device reputation. What is device reputation? This is a very important component, because when we are talking about digital identity, the first thing you must imagine is that a user, a citizen, should download in their mobile phone, an app, which will become the ID, okay? But we don't know anything about this device that the customer is bringing with them. We don't know anything. So thanks to this service, device reputation, we are going to be able to extract some information from that device in order to understand if we can trust in that device or not. For example, imagine that we are going to extract information, or we detect that the device of that customer is using a Tor browser. Tor browser, imagine, something that usually people use for visiting the dark web. So maybe this is something really significant in order to tell us, hey, be careful, or maybe let's stop that digital onboarding of this citizen into the digital ID because, hey, it's quite dangerous, okay? So these are the type of parameters we are going to offer to the government before the government decide if allow this user to continue the digital onboarding process in order to have a strong digital identity or not. The second technology, ID proofing with facial recognition. This is very important because this is a way we are going to verify the identity of that person. We are going to ask that person to take a picture of the ID in order to check if that ID is still valid, is not valid, is real, is not real. But as well, we are going to take a selfie of that person in order to make a facial recognition. You know, so with that information, we will continue the digital onboarding process in a secure way. But as well, we have other technologies, like, for example, the PKI infrastructure. And what is that? The PKI infrastructure, what is providing you is the generation of digital certificates that are, in fact, in many IDs so far, injected inside of the chips of the ID cards or the passports, okay? Those digital certificates will come with some information, like in order to authenticate yourself in a unique way, and as well to give you the possibility to sign documents as if you are presenting your physical ID. So the PKI infrastructure is the technology in order to generate those digital certificates, which are critical in order to protect your identity inside of this new digital ID world. The other technology is the digital certificates and signing, which is completely complementary with the public key infrastructure, because you need the public key infrastructure in order to generate the digital certificates, and later the digital certificates and signing is another capability in order to allow you as a citizen to sign any contract or to be authenticated using those digital certificates. And this is as well another component important in a digital identity technology, you know. And the final status is the identity and access management tool. This is as well another way than when you are finalizing the digital onboarding process of that person, how you are going to authenticate that person whenever it's getting access to the ID app. How? You can set up here the right credentials and the right mechanism of authentication for that specific user. Examples, you can allow the users to use their fingerprint in order to get access to the app, to the ID app. You can allow them to approve transactions using a push notification mechanism. You can allow to use the user to approve transactions using a facial recognition mechanism. So all these elements are going to be required within that technology. So with these 5 components, I strongly believe that we are in a position to offer to any government a secure digital identity solution for their citizens. So right now, after talking very, very quickly, I'm sorry because I've got only 15 minutes, I would like to talk a lot about all these concepts and all these components for a long time, but I don't have much time. What I would like to do is to use some examples of how we can onboard, how we can create a digital identity app for a government, and how the government can onboard their citizens within that digital identity using all those components, all those technology components that we have introduced previously. So first thing, as I said to you, is obviously extremely important to have an ID app ready. So the government should create a mobile app in order to be the app which is going to be the identity for that user. So if you remember, this is the objective. The objective is to have in your mobile phone the representation of your ID. And that application that we have to develop as a government is the one who has to create that image for the user, okay? So that's the first thing, to ask the customer, the citizen in this case, to download in their mobile phone an ID, the mobile app ID. The second point would be to start making the digital onboarding registration. In this specific case, what we are going to do is to take some pictures of the ID of the person at the front and at the back. Okay, that is the first thing, using the ID proofing technology that I was talking to you before. But as well, something which is very interesting is that because we are using an ID card with a chip, and this chip, it might contain digital certificates with some critical information, private information of the customer, like the fingerprint, like all their personal data, things like that. What we are going to do is to use the mobile phone to ask the citizen to hold the card against the back of the phone in order to give us the possibility by NFC technology to read the information which is coming on the chip of the card and bring it to the mobile phone. With that information already read it, what we are going to do is, by some databases that should be created by the government with all the citizens who wants to apply for that digital identity, what we are going to do is to double check informations coming from the information we read from the chip of the ID of the person. You know, we are going to validate this. Plus, we are going to take a selfie of the citizen in order to make a facial recognition. And plus, we are going to check the device. So we are going to make a device reputation service in order to understand if that device is trustable enough in order to allow this customer to finalize this digital onboarding process. But not only this, when you finally got the okay with the digital onboarding, with the ID proofing technology, with the device reputation technology, and reading all the information coming from the chip and check it with the backend database of the customer, of the government, in order to validate if all the information is okay, what we are going to do is to finalize the process. And how? Asking the customer to generate their credentials in order to get access to their ID, to that application which is their ID. Okay, so finally, when we introduce the PIN, when we set up the PIN, what we are going to get basically is the final status of the ID. So practically you are already on board with all the information. Okay, so your app is completely ready in order to interact with the app and in order to be used. Okay, so this is the key of all the story. So once we finalize the digital onboarding process, we are going to generate the credentials, and these credentials will be stored into the database of the customer, of the government, about this customer, and this customer today is on board and can operate with a mobile app ID, with a digital ID, okay? So this is the final process. This is how it looks like and how we combine many different applications, many different components in order to make this secure and make this interesting for everybody. Because the most important thing is that not only the security, is that this application, this digital identity could be used in an easy way. So could be handy. So in order to finalize, what I would like to show you is, okay, now we have a digital ID, a citizen digital ID. What we can do with that digital ID, you know? So what we can do is exactly this, to use that digital ID as a way of authenticate the person, as a way of verify the identity of that person with any e-government portal. So imagine that the government wants to launch different services for their citizens. So instead of asking all the citizens to go to different physical branches in order to finalize this process, in order to, to apply for something or for getting something of this service, what we are going to do is to ask to these citizens to request for that service or to finalize that process using the digital tools, using the portal, the e-government portals. And thanks to the mobile ID, and thanks to the different mechanisms of authentications that we can offer to the customer, to the citizen in order to be authenticated, imagine using a push notification, using the fingerprint recognition, facial recognition, any mechanism. Thanks to all this, we are going to be able to authenticate that person, you know, and allow that person to perform, to finalize any process in that service that we are offering on internet without asking this person to be in the, to go to the physical branch in order to verify their identity. So guys, that's all. I know that it's very, very quickly. I try to summarize the presentation as much as I can, because I try to concentrate at least all the most important components whenever we are talking about digital identity for government, digital identity for citizens. And I hope it was quite representative, that presentation, and helps you to understand much better how we can do a secure and better world using a digital ID. So now I'm open to receive questions. Thank you very much.